Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I move that the Northern Territory Government, 1, acknowledges the findings and recommendations of the Coronal Inquest into the death of Kumanjayi Walker and the impact of this tragedy on his family, the Warlpiri people and the wider Yuendumu community. 2, commits to implementing all recommendations from the inquest in full in consultation with Aboriginal communities. And 3, establishes a community-led oversight and implementation group, including Aboriginal elders, legal experts, community advocates, to ensure transparency and accountability. 4, acknowledges that the Northern Territory police officers work in challenging and complex circumstances and that strengthened health and wellbeing support should be prioritised. 5, reinstates funding to the Northern Territory Police Anti-Racism Review to ensure that NT Police are properly supported to address any systemic cultural issues within the force. And 6, calls for a pilot program in Yuendumu, co-designed with traditional owners and leaders, to restructure local governance and service delivery based on kinship and cultural authority as a model for other remote communities. Madam Speaker, today I rise with a heavy heart and steadfast in resolve. We gather not just to reflect on the loss of life that was Kumanjayi Walker, but to reckon with the truths his death revealed, truths his family and the Warlpiri community of Yuendumu have carried every day since November 9th, 2019. Kumanjayi was more than a headline. He was a grandson, a nephew, a young Warlpiri man, still finding his way in a world that not only sometimes is unfair, but is unkind to Aboriginal people. His death was tragic, but was not isolated. It was a result of systemic failures we can no longer ignore. The Coronal Inquest did not just deliver findings, Madam Speaker. It held up a mirror to our justice system, our policing structures, and our ability to listen to Aboriginal voices and act with courage and care. And so today, I bring forward this motion, not as symbolism, but as a call to action, because we owe Kumanjayi's family and every family who has lived through the pain of injustice more than sympathy. We owe them accountability and we owe them change. This motion calls for 6 things. First, it formally acknowledges the findings and recommendations of the inquest, the deep and ongoing impact of this tragedy on Kumanjayi's family, the Warlpiri people and the community of Yuendumu who are still grieving. Madam Speaker, I remember the night we got the call, families telling us what had happened. I remember the sadness and the trauma and the shock in their voices. I remember being at the Sorry camp with the then member for Scott McConnell. I remember being at Kumanjayi's funeral in Yuendumu. I only returned a few weeks ago to his grave. The heartache still there, the sadness still heavy. Secondly, this motion commits to implementing all 33 recommendations in full, not behind closed doors in Darwin, but through genuine consultation with Aboriginal communities. Reforms must be done with communities, not to them, hand in hand and on country. This needs to be the new minimal standard when making decisions about communities. It needs to be done by communities. Thirdly, it establishes a community-led oversight and implementation group, including Aboriginal elders, legal experts and trusted advocates. Rebuilding trust must begin with transparency, cultural authority and self-determination. Fourth, it recognises what is often forgotten, that NT police officers work in highly complex, demanding and often dangerous conditions. While we pursue reform, we must also strengthen support for mental health and wellbeing for those serving on the front lines. Many of my own family, Madam Speaker, work in the force as Aboriginal liaison officers, community constables and ALOs. And they have carried the weight of this tragedy every day, continuing to serve their communities through difficult, incredibly difficult times. I honour their commitment to community safety, but I also acknowledge how uncomfortable it has been for many of them, sometimes serving alongside members who don't respect them or acknowledge them and discriminate them. Fifth, this motion calls for the reinstatement of funding to the Northern Territory Police Anti-Racism Review. Madam Speaker, a critical step in confronting systemic cultural issues within the force. Cutting the review sent the wrong message. Reinstating it is not about blame. It is about ensuring our systems are fair, just and safe for everyone. Madam Speaker, I know that not everyone in the force is racist. We all acknowledge that, but we must work to identify ways systemic and institutional racism can be stepped out, because it does exist. Sixth, it proposes a bold new path, a pilot program in Yuendumu, co-designed with traditional owners, cultural leaders and representatives from the 16 skin groups from the Warlpiri Nation. A model of governance and service delivery grounded in kinship, in culture, in community. Because, Madam Speaker, the most effective solutions are community solutions. Madam Speaker, the inquest made it clear the harm caused when Aboriginal people are excluded from the systems that govern their lives. It reminded us the pain that lingers when culture is disrespected, voice is silenced and justice is denied. But, Madam Speaker, this is a moment and this is a chance to do better. This motion is not an end point. It is a foundational step, a foundation for real healing, genuine partnership and systemic and systematic change. If we are serious about truth-telling, about reconciliation and about justice, then we must be serious about acting on what the coroner has told us. Instead, Madam Speaker, the CLP government has done the opposite. Rather than engaged in a considered response, they've undermined the separation of powers, publicly criticising the coroner and the council assisting. Rather than work collaboratively, they are considering changes to the Coroner's Act, a move seemingly driven not by good policy, but by discomfort with the truths revealed. We've heard talk about the cost of the inquest, nearly $8 million. But let's be clear, that cost was necessary. Necessary to uncover the truth. Necessary to allow the community access and for people in the community to interact with that system. Necessary to prevent future deaths. Necessary to honour the life of Kumanjayi Walker. And the coroner gave us a clear, achievable path forward. The 33 recommendations are not radical. They are reasonable. They are evidence-based and they are life-saving. We've now had 2 coronial inquests provided to the government with workable recommendations. We cannot keep shelving them. We cannot keep ignoring them. We must act. Over 683 pages of testimony, lived experience, pain and truth. That's what the Walker coronial inquest has given us. And yet, we are still debating whether to listen. We sat on the red, sunburnt earth of Yuendumu as the final report was handed down by the Northern Territory's coroner. It was a moment of mixed emotions. Some, it was closure. And also, for some, it was deep anxiety about what would follow. For years, the Warlpiri people have carried this burden with dignity. They have remained calm, resilient, focused on justice. As the coroner began reading her findings, I saw in the faces the validation of what many had long known. Racism exists. Rolf was a racist, and his racist attitudes were allowed to flourish. It told us that systems are repeatedly failing. The report made it clear it's time for new responses to old problems. That means building alternative first responder models, ones that put culture, care and community at the centre. Policing alone cannot address the complex social challenges we face in our community. We need mental health professionals, social workers, elders and trained mediators, peacekeepers, all on the ground, people trusted by our communities. We must invest in Aboriginal-led law and justice groups, not as side projects, but as central pillars to our justice system. These groups hold the knowledge, the trust, the solutions. The Territory Government has a chance right now to lead, to shift from reactive, crisis-driven responses to proactive, community-driven models, but that takes political will. It means resourcing communities, not just police stations and police operations. It means handing over decision-making power, not just running consultations. It means confronting the uncomfortable truths of structural failure and acting on them. Madam Speaker, Kumanjayi Walker should still be here. If we're serious about stopping more deaths in custody, we need a justice system that sees, hears and values Aboriginal lives, not treats them as afterthoughts. We need a justice system that people can see themselves in. Madam Speaker, to my knowledge, not one Aboriginal person was on the jury in the matter we are discussing. We must look at alternative ways of ensuring First Nations people are represented in all aspects of our justice system. As an Aboriginal man and as a representative of Gwadja, and to someone who deeply believes in the strength of our people, I say this to our people. The days are dark and sometimes seem endless, but I will continue walking with you through that darkness until together we can step into the light. The Walpri people are a proud people. They are a strong people, and I am proud to call them family. I am Japananga. But our journey is far from over. The lead up to the handing down of the final report, we lost another Walpri man, Kumanjayi White, a relative of mine through my kinship system. A 24-year-old man with a disability died after being restrained by off-duty police in a confectionery aisle of a Coles supermarket. That was 2 months ago, and we still do not know if charges will be laid. He died in a lolly aisle, in public, and yet still no answers. Since the Royal Commission in 1991 into Aboriginal deaths in custody, 602 Aboriginal people have died. This is not a number to gloss over. This is a national shame. It's a national disgrace. It is beyond debate that there is a problem, a systemic, structural problem. And until we are all prepared to acknowledge that, we are all complicit in allowing it to continue. We must do better. We must invest in what works. And the government must lead by accepting and implementing the coroner's recommendations, not resisting them. Madam Speaker, I want to also take time this afternoon to table a letter from the Justice for Walker campaign. And before I do so, I want to read that onto the parliamentary record. This is a letter on behalf of the family of Kumanjayi Walker and the Yundamu community, alongside 23 Aboriginal community, family violence and legal organisations. asking the Whanokiyaro government to publicly commit to the findings of the review and recommendation of Coroner Armitage in the Coronal Inquest into the death of Kumanjayi Walker and engage with Aboriginal communities and the legal sector. The letter is addressed to the Chief Minister, the Attorney-General, the Health and Aboriginal Affairs Minister, the Minister for Children and Families, the Minister for Education and Training, the Minister for Seniors, Youth and Equality, and the Police Commissioner, Acting Police Commissioner Martin Dole. Dear Chief Minister, Ministers and Acting Police Commissioner, no more Aboriginal deaths at the hands of police. The time to work with Yapa is now. Madam Speaker, Yapa means Aboriginal. The family of Kumanjayi Walker and the Yuendamu community, alongside 23 Aboriginal community, family violence and legal organisations, today call on the Whanokiyaro government to publicly commit to the findings and recommendations of Coroner Armitage in the Coronal Inquest into the death of Kumanjayi Walker and engage with Aboriginal communities and the legal sector. Aboriginal deaths at the hands of police must stop. Aboriginal people have the solution, and now is the time to work with us to ensure that our people thrive, our children grow up safe and supported. Change is not only possible, but well overdue. Kumanjayi Walker was killed after being shot 3 times at close range by a police officer who the coroner found was a racist, had derived satisfaction from using excessive force and had not been properly disciplined or supervised by the Northern Territory Police. The coroner formally found what Aboriginal people in the NT have always known, that no one is holding the NT Police accountable when they use excessive force and hurt Aboriginal people. And there is an entrenched systemic and structural racism within the Northern Territory Police Force. Devastatingly, Kumanjayi Walker's death was found to be entirely avoidable. It is clear to the Yuendamu community, as well as to the Aboriginal community and legal sectors, that there must be an independent oversight of police. We are calling for the establishment of an NT Police Ombudsman to independently investigate police misconduct, excessive use of force and systemic racism. Most importantly, a police ombudsman should have clear powers and resources to independently investigate Aboriginal deaths in custody. The coroner also made specific recommendations to the Whanokiyaro government to implement. Many of them involve working directly with Yuendamu community representatives and the legal sector to implement community-led solutions. These include developing Aboriginal-led on-country programs, rehabilitation and diversion services for young people, resourcing culturally skilled mediators, alleviating the work of our Aboriginal community police officers, and developing an anti-racism strategy. These recommendations recognise what we have been trying to tell the government for many years, that it is only through self-governance, self-determination and full community control that Warlpiri people can begin to heal and then dream of a safer, happier future where our children flourish. Warlpiri people and all Aboriginal people want lasting change that uplifts our people and ensures a strong, healthy future for generations to come. We do not need to be fixed by others. Now is the time to genuinely listen, to clear the path for our autonomy and to provide the resources and support that will enable us to shape our own future. This is what will bring lasting solutions and restore trust. These are not only the right things to do, they are essential steps in preventing needless loss of life and build a better future for all. We are ready to work together for profound, lasting change, and we urge you to act now and act boldly. We call on the Whanokiyaro government to publicly commit to implementing the recommendations of the Coroner Armitage Coronal Inquest into the Kumanjayi Walker's death. 2, publicly commit to establishing a police ombudsman in the Northern Territory so that there is independent investigations of police misconduct and deaths in custody. To commence working and engaging with Kumanjayi Walker Cultural Authority, Yuendamu Aboriginal Corporation, consisting of representatives from the 16 skin groups of Yuendamu community and from the Aboriginal community legal sectors to progress the implementation of Coroner Armitage's recommendations. Sincerely, Samara Fendez Brown, cousin to Kumanjayi Walker, Joyce Brown, Leanne Oldfield, Margaret Brown, Stephen Marshall, Ned Hargraves, Derek Williams, Robin Granitz, Carl Hampton, Rachel Hocking. In addition to the family representation as stated above, the letter is supported by organisations: the Human Rights Law Centre, the Central Australian Women's Legal Service, Justice Not Jails, Her Story Mbanthwa, First Peoples Disability Network, the Australian Child Rights Task Force, Justice Reform Initiative, Jailing is Failing, the Northern Territory Council of Social Services, the Central Australian Youth Justice, Smarter Justice for Safer Communities, Amnesty International, the Australian Childhood Foundation, Liberty Victoria, Clothing the Gaps, Liberty Victoria's Rights Advocacy Project, Children's Ground, Indigenous Allied Health Australia, Save the Children, 54 Reasons, Democracy in Colour, the Gwaja Foundation, the Walpri Project, the National Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Legal Services, Truth, Justice for Our People. Madam Speaker, I seek leave to place that letter on the parliamentary record.
Is leave granted? All those in favour say aye. To the contrary, no. Leave is granted.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I want to thank every individual, every family member and every community member who gave testimony, evidence and lived experience into this inquest. Your courage has moved us. Your stories have changed us. And your calls for justice shall not go unanswered, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, people may dismiss coronial inquest findings and reports. We heard yesterday the government speak about the coronial inquest into 4 amazing Aboriginal women who had lost their lives and completely discredit that coronial. Madam Speaker, like this coronial, they are people's stories. They are people's truths. They deserve to be respected, not ignored. Madam Speaker, it has nearly been 5 years since the life of Kumanjayi Walker was taken in Yuendamu. And in that time, the pain from that moment has not faded. It's pain that sits deep in the hearts of his family. The Walpri people, but also importantly, the Luritja people. Kumanjayi, a proud Walpri Luritja man. Madam Speaker, the broader community, not only of Yuendamu, but of the Northern Territory and of Australia, feel this pain. It is a pain that must be acknowledged by all of us who serve in public life. The family, the elders, the community members of Yuendamu and of our country, to all our First Nations brothers and sisters, I stand with you in your grief. I see your grief, I hear your calls for justice, and I remain committed to ensuring that this tragedy leads to meaningful change, not just words, but actions. The coroner's finding of the Walker coronial inquest must be a turning point. We can simply not afford to express sorrow and then go back to business as usual. The systemic failures laid bare throughout this process require a response that is bold, that is structural, and that is grounded in justice, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, we have an opportunity before us. The coroner's inquest has given us a blueprint, a pathway to do things differently, an opportunity to make real and lasting change, an opportunity to stop people like Kumanjayi Walker and Kumanjayi White dying, because the loss of life of anyone is a loss too many. I encourage members of this government to come to Yuendamu. It's a beautiful place. It is a place that, while many people talk about it in a negative way, it's much like all of our remote communities. They are places of love, of hope, of aspiration, and home to amazing people. People of such strength and resilience. And I want to acknowledge, Madam Speaker, that there are people who are not with us today, elders, who 5 years ago stood up on the lawns of the courthouse in Alice Springs demanding justice for Walker. And we need to honour them as well, our ancestors who have joined the Jukupa, who have joined the night skies and shine bright down on our communities. This government has a chance to come out there. I am the member for Gwadja, and I will absolutely never ever turn away an opportunity to take one of the government ministers out to Yuendamu, to introduce you to Yapa, to let them talk to you about what we can do to change. Because this isn't just about changing the justice system, this is about changing the landscape in remote Aboriginal communities. Because if we dive down deep into all of those coronial inquests, the Kumanjayi Walker coronial inquest, the inquest into the death of those 4 amazing women, it also tells us we need to be investing in the social determinants in the Northern Territory. We need to be doing more work, yes, to build more houses, yes, to ensure that there are strong protections for our children. The safety of Territory children should always be paramount. Yes, to make sure that there are stronger and better health services in our remote communities, and that our crisis systems are in fact working. We should have never allowed an entire health network to leave the community of Yuendamu, not only for that community, but for our staff. Our frontline workers were also going into that community with no health service. Our schools. We celebrated 50 years of bilingual education in Yuendamu, and we couldn't even get a single member of the CLP government out there. The Attorney-General, the first law officer of the Northern Territory, Madam Speaker, has not even been to a Central Australian remote Aboriginal community in 11 months. 11 months. Madam Speaker, I'm going to ask for Standing Order 43, an extension of time, if I may.
Is an extension of time granted? All those in favour say aye. To the contrary, no. An extension is granted.
There is a law and justice group being set up in Yuendamu. They absolutely would welcome the opportunity to meet with the Attorney-General, because they want to get that group up and running and to be strong. Yes, we all need to do work. No one in this parliament, not on any side of any party or any member, is resolved from a responsibility here. We all have a responsibility and we all must do better. Now, Madam Speaker, I want to also acknowledge all of the hard work, not only of the government agencies, but of our legal community, who were all involved in that coronial inquest. Counsel assisting, the Coroner's Office, the Department of Health, the Department of Attorney General and Justice, and all other relevant departments that may have been required to come and give testimony or provide submissions. Incredibly important work. I also want to acknowledge the Aboriginal Interpreter Service, who made sure that it could be put into Warlpiri and Luritja, so that when the coroner was handing down her findings, family had the opportunity after it to talk, to decompress, to get the language clear, so that there wasn't an opportunity for any barriers. Important work. And yet it did cost money. But we're talking about a territory life. And people in remote communities deserve access to justice, not just when we're talking about our courts, but when we're talking about coronial inquests, when we're talking about access to all justice services. Madam Speaker, I also want to acknowledge everyone in the Northern Territory who has come out and supported members of our community in times of crisis and in need. Because I know how much that is appreciated, particularly by the Warlpiri Nation, not only during the time of the loss of life for Kumanjayi Walker, but most recently, May this year, when Kumanjayi White was also taken from us. We do live in an amazing place, and I want to thank all of those people who have rallied around to support the upper Aboriginal people in those times of need and times of crisis. It has been greatly received and greatly respected. Samara Fendes-Brown has been so strong. I want to also acknowledge my family. Ned Hargraves, that's a leader. Strong, resilient, and has continually called for calm. Robin Granitz, most people from Central Australia know Robin. Robin's always there at a time of need for the Warlpiri communities. I want to absolutely acknowledge Robin for his continued contributions and supports for peace, for calm, and for justice. Robin is an amazing man. I want to also acknowledge Derek Williams, who works in the Northern Territory Police Force as an officer in that amazing community of Yuendamu. That is leadership. He's an amazing man who always looks after his community and has worked diligently over a number of years to serve that community. Again, in closing, Madam Speaker, I want to acknowledge just the resilience and strength of the Warlpiri communities and the Luritja communities. Papunya, Haas Bluff, Mount Liebig, all the way to Pintabee Lands, Kintor, all related to Kumanjayi Walker, all still feeling and carrying that pain. Madam Speaker, there is a long road to go, but right now we have a moment in time where we have a clear pathway. All of the recommendations designed by the coroner are designed in a manner which can allow them to be accepted, which can allow them to be delivered over a period of time if work is needed to be done to ensure that they have effective implementation and delivery. When you look at those recommendations, Madam Speaker, they are, to some, moderate. They can all be achieved and they should all be achieved. Madam Speaker, I commend this motion to the Assembly, and I think we should all reflect on where we are. And yes, there are matters that require us to work with the Commonwealth, and we should. Because the 1991 Royal Commission into Aboriginal deaths in custody, since 1991, 602 Aboriginal people have died in custody. I am calling for a review of the recommendations of the Royal Commission into Aboriginal deaths in custody. We need a health check. We need to look at what was accepted, what hasn't been accepted, what was implemented but is not working and needs to be fixed, because we need to do better. We owe it to our communities. We owe it to make our communities safer, Madam Speaker. Thank you.
Attorney General.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The coroner handing down her findings into the death of Kumanjayi Walker